This is the story of Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. You can read along with me in your book. You will know it is time to turn the page when you hear the communicator beep like this. Let's begin now. Deep in space, the captain of the starship Saratoga sent an urgent message to Starfleet Command.
We are tracking an enormous probe of unknown origin. On a course for Earth, please advise.
Suddenly, strange sound waves from the probe engulfed the starship. The captain leaped up.
Red alert! Shields up, Lieutenant!
It was too late. The ship's power systems failed, and the mysterious probe sailed away toward Earth. Meanwhile, on the planet Vulcan, Admiral James T. Kirk made an entry in his log.
Stardate 8390. This is the third month of our Vulcan exile. We are uncertain about the progress of Mr. Spock's memory training. We know a court-martial awaits us for our actions in his rescue, but let the record show that the commander and crew of the late starship Enterprise have voted to return to Earth. We are prepared to face the charges leveled against us.
During Spock's rescue, Kirk and his crew had captured a Klingon warship, which they renamed the Bounty. Now, Admiral Kirk mounted the bridge.
Mr. Scott, how soon can we get underway?
One more day, sir. Repairing her is easy. Reading Klingon is hard.
Dr. McCoy took the Admiral aside.
Being court-martialed is bad enough, Jim. But do we have to go home in this Klingon flea trap?
We could learn a thing or two from this flea trap, Bones. Besides, it has a cloaking device that might come in handy.
The next day, the Bounty began its voyage home. As Spock resumed his post at the science officer's console, Dr. McCoy leaned over to Kirk.
Are you sure he's ready for this? He's not exactly back to his old form yet.
Don't worry, Bones. It'll come back to him.
Commander Uhura looked up from her console.
Admiral, I'm receiving a distress signal from Earth.
Put it on the screen, Uhura.
A garbled image of the Starfleet president appeared on the bridge view screen.
Warning to all starships, do not approach Earth. Mysterious probe orbiting. Emits powerful sound waves. Directed at oceans. Clouds enveloping planet. Temperatures dropping. Planet cannot survive.
Admiral Kirk whirled around.
Uhura, let us hear the probe.
Coming up on speakers, sir.
Spock lifted an eyebrow.
Most unusual. An unknown form of energy showing great intelligence and directed at the Earth's oceans. Uhura, modify the probe's signals to simulate what they would sound like underwater.
The altered signal echoed through the ship.
Fascinating. As I suspected, Admiral, it is the song sung by humpback whales. They have been extinct since the 21st century. To communicate with the probe, we must find a humpback whale.
Admiral Kirk leaped to his feet.
If we slingshot around the sun and go back in time, we may have a chance. We did it before with the Enterprise. Spock, start your computations for time warp.
Dr. McCoy shook his head.
The Enterprise was a first-class starship. You can't take this rust bucket back through time.
Do you know another way to find an extinct whale, Doctor?
The engines roared, and the Bounty streaked toward the sun. Warp speed 3, warp 5, warp 7. The ship sped faster and faster. At the last possible moment, Admiral Kirk gave the order.
Now, Mr. Sulu.
The helmsman fired the final set of accelerators, and the Bounty whipped along the edge of the sun, straining against the tremendous gravity. It came around the far side, snapped free from the pull of the sun, and hurtled back toward Earth. Mr. Spock pointed to the view screen.
I believe we have arrived at the late 20th century. I am receiving and homing in on a strong whale song signal.
Kirk ordered the Bounty to descend from orbit under cover of the cloaking device. Spock was puzzled.
There seem to be 2 whales trapped in shallow water. Their signal is coming from the city of San Francisco.
As the invisible Bounty landed quietly in Golden Gate Park, Chief Engineer Scott discovered a problem.
Admiral, our dilithium crystals are giving out. We have only enough power to last about 24 hours. We'll need to find a source of high-energy photons to restore the crystals, or we'll never get back off the ground.
Kirk split the crew into teams.
Commanders Chekhov and Uhura are assigned to the high-energy photon problem. Mr. Scott, you'll need to build a holding tank big enough for 2 whales to make the trip back with us. Dr. McCoy and Commander Sulu will assist you. Captain Spock and I will attempt to trace the whale songs to their source. Be careful. And everyone, remember where we parked.
The teams hurried into San Francisco. Kirk and Spock hadn't gone far when the Admiral spotted an ad on the side of a bus.
See George and Gracie, the only 2 humpback whales in captivity at the Cetacean Institute, Sausalito. Come on, Spock. I think we've found what we're looking for.
Kirk and Spock took a bus to the Cetacean Institute and joined a tour group led by Dr. Gillian Taylor. After explaining the life cycle of whales, she led everyone outside.
If you'll follow me, I'll introduce you to the Institute's pride and joy.
She took the group to an enormous seawater tank.
Meet George and Gracie. Beautiful, aren't they?
Spock slipped away unnoticed from the group as Dr. Taylor continued.
Unfortunately, these whales are outgrowing our ability to care for them and will soon be returned to the sea.
Admiral Kirk spoke up.
Why is that unfortunate?
The chances are still very high they'll be hunted by whalers.
At that moment, Dr. Taylor looked at the tank. Inside, swimming next to the whales, was Spock. His hands were on the side of George's head in a Vulcan mind meld. Dr. Taylor raced to the tank, with Kirk close behind her, and confronted Spock.
Okay, Buster, what do you think you're doing?
Spock emerged from the tank.
Attempting to communicate, Doctor.
She pointed to the exit.
You 2 kooks, get out of here!
Later, while Kirk and Spock were walking back to town, Dr. Taylor pulled up in her pickup truck.
You may be kooks, but it's a long walk back to the city, and I've always had a soft spot for the underdog. Hop in.
As they drove to town, Kirk turned to her.
What if I told you we can take George and Gracie to a place where they'll never be hunted? Would you be interested in helping us?
Of course, if it were true.
Tell us, Doctor, can we track the whales once they're released?
Sure, they'll be equipped with transmitters, but I'm not telling you any more unless I get some straight answers. Who are you guys?
Kirk knew he would have to take a chance.
I'll tell you the truth. I know this will be hard for you to believe, but my name is Admiral Kirk. We come from your future, the 23rd century.
Dr. Taylor pulled into Golden Gate Park.
You're right. I don't believe you. This is your stop, Admiral. All ashore.
Although Spock got out immediately, Kirk lingered for a moment.
If you change your mind about helping, Doctor, we'll be here.
She drove away, and her passengers beamed aboard the Bounty. Inside, Scotty gave Kirk a status report.
The whale tank is almost complete, sir. And the high-energy photons that Chekhov and Uhura brought back should have us up to full power in a few hours.
By morning, the Bounty and her crew were ready. Uhura pointed to the view screen.
Admiral, look outside the ship.
Kirk! Kirk, are you there?
Dr. Taylor stood in the park. Kirk quickly beamed her aboard, and she looked around, astonished.
It's true. You're from the future. So maybe you can help. George and Gracie were shipped to the Arctic, and the whalers are already closing in on them. I want to help you find them, Admiral.
Welcome aboard, Doctor. Mr. Sulu, take us north.
In a few minutes, the crew heard a faint whale song. Gillian gestured to Scotty.
That's it! That's it!
As the ship broke through the clouds, a whaling vessel closed in on George and Gracie. When the harpoon cannon fired, Kirk quickly reacted.
Dive, Mr. Sulu!
The invisible bounty rushed between the whales and the hunters. The harpoon clanked off the bounty and fell harmlessly into the sea. While the stunned whalers watched, Scotty beamed George and Gracie on board, and the ship zoomed off. On the bridge, McCoy approached Kirk and Gillian.
Dr. Taylor, I'm afraid it's time for you to get off. We're headed back to the 23rd century.
Those whales are my whole life. I'm going with you.
Kirk turned to his science officer.
Mr. Spock, you heard the lady.
Begin reverse time warp maneuver.
The bridge shook wildly as the bounty rushed around the sun. With a final burst, the ship snapped free and roared back toward Earth. Mr. Spock turned to Kirk.
Reverse time warp maneuver complete, but the added weight of the whales has used up all the ship's power.
The bounty hurtled out of control and plunged past the Golden Gate Bridge into the Pacific Ocean. Kirk sprang into action.
Mr. Spock, evacuate the crew! I'm going to release George and Gracie.
With Scotty behind him, he raced down to the cargo bay and saw water gushing in.
Oh, no, they're trapped.
Although Scotty tried to stop him, Kirk dove in and pushed the emergency release. The bay doors exploded open, sweeping Kirk and the whales into the sea. George swam away from the ship and then hung motionless just below the surface. His whale song called out to the orbiting probe. There was an answer, and the probe quietly sailed away. No one but George and Gracie knew what it had said. At the court-martial several days afterward, the Starfleet president addressed Kirk and his crew.
Kirk, because you disobeyed a superior officer, you will be reduced in rank to captain. However, your actions during the probe crisis are to be commended. Because of this, all charges are being dropped.
Later, as they approached the space dock, they were amazed to see the ship assigned to them, a gleaming new USS Enterprise. Captain Kirk turned to his crew.
My friends, we've come home.